Hey, techies. And yes, I said techies. And I know that my assistant host here is hating that term, but you guys haven't given us a replacement yet. And he hasn't come up with a replacement.
Every time I hear that term, I die inside a little.
Well, the techies don't.
You guys know what we're talking about. You saw the title and everything, but let's go over it anyways, just in case. You know, some people just see that it's one of our videos and blindly click on it no matter what it is, so maybe they don't know.
No one does that.
I know.
But yeah, we're talking about video games today because we love video games.
Well, of course we love video games.
That's why we got into computers in the first place. Let's admit that.
Yeah.
Everyone got into computers because they wanted to play games. It just happens that they, may want to do other things, but everyone plays video games.
Yeah. Right. Video games are awesome. Everyone loves video games. Even your grandma loves video games, playing Candy Crush or whatever.
That whole concept just amazes me at this point, that everyone's got an arcade in their pocket, and we'll get to that as we go along, but that still amazes me. So before we get started, I think we need to kind of explain a little bit of our history with video games. So I thought to kind of get us going, we would find out a few things about you first, and then you can ask me.
Okay.
What was the first video game console you ever remember playing?
Ooh. There were several right around the same time, so I don't have the best answer, but it would have either been a Game Boy Color or PlayStation 1. However, absolutely my first memories were playing video games on a Windows-based computer.
Like a Windows 3, you think? Or
probably Windows 95.
95.
Because you like to stay updated. Probably, I'd say my first video game memory
I forget again that you were born in 96. So
is playing Sonic the Hedgehog on PC.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. What was the first video game console that you owned yourself? Not that you were given from your parents.
That I bought myself?
Yeah. First. Well, what was the first one that your parents bought you?
Game Boy Advance.
Okay. What about console?
Not handheld. Handhelds were pretty important for me.
No, I understand. But what was a console?
Probably the PlayStation 2.
Okay. And what was the first console you bought for yourself?
That's one of my stories for later.
Okay.
So I'm going to save that as a cliffhanger.
Okay. All right. And what are some of the consoles that you've owned? Just in a random list.
We joke about this all the time. I own all of them. I kind of went nuts for a while, and I did scale back a little after the fact, but I have owned or own everything. In my bedroom, I have plugged in right now a Wii U.
I'm sorry.
A Switch.
Okay, that's
with a Switch dock. Xbox 360.
Okay.
Which I barely use. My Sega Saturn.
Okay.
My Dreamcast.
Love the Dreamcast.
My GameCube.
Okay.
And my Nintendo 64. And then I've got bins.
I'm sensing some huge Nintendo fanboyism.
I do very much like Nintendo.
Yeah.
I've got bins with many others in them. I will say, I've never owned an Atari console.
Never.
I've owned
all the retro things you bought. You've never owned one.
Never. I've owned tons of Sega consoles. I even own what's the name? Oh, that's gonna drive me nuts.
I don't know because you've had so many. I'm not sure which one you're
It's
going
the kids console they made. The Pico. I own a Sega Pico.
Really?
Yeah. So I own a lot.
Wow. All right. So now I'll give you the chance to ask me some questions.
Okay. What was the first game you ever remember ever playing?
Game?
Yes, game.
Pong.
Pong.
Yeah.
An actual Pong system? Or one of the million knockoffs?
It was an actual Pong game, I believe, but I don't remember what console it was on. Maybe it was... I'm not sure. I honestly don't remember. I do remember playing Pong very young.
I mean, it's Pong. You know.
Right. So that would be the first, game
How
I
about
remember.
game console? Because you went through the period where that became a thing.
The first console that I played was in a television at a friend's house because I didn't have a video game system and he did. And the television I think is kind of interesting because not only did you have the Intellivision, but you had the Tandyvision 1, you had the Sears Super Arcade, and then even the Intellivision, there was two different variants. There was the Mattel and then the Sylvania GTE one. So it was kind of like a clone before clones were a thing.
Right.
And then it had the controllers where you could put a little card in them. So I remember the first game I was playing on it was a baseball game, and you had this little card you slipped in, and it had the diamond on it and everything.
Because for some reason they had to make the controllers look like phones.
Right.
How
I don't like the ColecoVision controller, though.
How do games those simple need so many buttons?
But think about it. For a baseball game, if you want to throw to a particular base, you had the button right there.
Most games, though, it didn't make any sense.
I'll give you that.
But
yeah, that was the first console I remember using. And then the first console that I own is part of a story I'll tell later. But
another
I will.
cliffhanger?
I'll leave a little bit of that.
Okay.
So.
All right. Do we want to go in and just have a fireside chat?
You missed one of the questions I really wanted to answer.
I'm forgetful. What's the first one you bought for yourself? Was that it?
That's one, but there's one more. I'll interview myself for the rest of this segment.
I'm a skilled interviewer.
First console that I remember buying for myself, not one that was given to me, was a PlayStation 1. And I have to put an asterisk here because I had a really good friend of mine in Chicago. And he and I went to the store one day and he says, "Hey, why don't we buy PlayStations?" I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, I don't know if I want to spend that much money. He goes, no. We'll buy it, and if you don't like it, I'll pay it for you. I want someone else to have one too.
So we can talk with games and
right. So he talked me into getting one, and that's how I got, because I hadn't bought consoles in years. I haven't even thought about them in years, and that's how I got back into wanting to have a console.
So I assume you did not have him pay for it because you had quite the PS1 collection.
Ironically, the PS1 that you played on was the one that I bought with him. So, yeah, I kept it, enjoyed it, and loved it, and I really liked the PS1. Now, I've had a lot of consoles, though. I've had Dreamcast, PS1, PS2, Atari 2600, Sega Master System.
But then you hit some wall.
I had children.
Yeah, I guess that's the good.
And then they had all of them. I mean, if you want to talk about the ones that I bought my children, that extends the list greatly, but none of them were for me.
Right. What was the last one you bought for yourself?
PlayStation 2.
Yeah. Ever since then, you've been strictly a PC guy.
Yeah, and I really want a baseball game, so I've come this close countless number of times to buying a PS4 because I want the show. Mm-hmm. But, buying a console just for one game seems kind of silly. And I hate exclusive deals for that reason. And I do understand that they're going to be expanding and offering it, but I have a feeling it's going to be for the Xbox and the Switch and still not PC, which doesn't solve my problem, so I don't know. And the last one I bought for one of my kids was a Switch.
So, did I get through all the questions
I think
now?
you covered everything that,
Great. So we're going to have a nice
necessary
fireside chat and just tell some fun little anecdotes and stories about our video game history to kind of set that foundation probably for future videos. I'm sure you've got quite a few, but I want to actually start us off. Because I just listed, hey, I started with these devices, and for a lot of you, that's going to make me look really young because...
You are young.
Yeah.
Compared to me.
Compared to you. Yeah, you're old. But I had a lot of experiences also with consoles before my time. So I'm going to start by sharing that as a kid, especially as a young teenager, I played a ton of Nintendo, NES Nintendo.
So let me ask you, because you are a Nintendo fanboy,
Sometimes.
why Nintendo?
Oh boy, they're great. Good games, good characters, good games. I don't always play. I'm not like a diehard. I only play Nintendo stuff, but I've had tons of good memories with Nintendo.
Do you remember my experience with Nintendo?
Buying an N64 and hating it.
Yes, but do you remember what I did the same time I bought the N64?
What did you do?
Well, I went to one of the video game stores in the mall. I forget what they were called back then. And I couldn't decide which console I wanted. I really liked the Dreamcast, but you really wanted an N64.
Of course.
So I told the salesman to give me one of each, and I would decide which one I liked.
You kept the Dreamcast.
I loved my Dreamcast. Loved it.
So look at this. I said I'll tell a story first, and you ended up. Yep. You totally
I
stole
took
my
over.
thunder. So my grandmother had an NES, and me and my older brother would go over and stay the night with her all the time.
And was it an NES or?
Yeah, it was an NES. It was actually the later top loader model, which doesn't look like the big boxy one. Instead, it's quite small, and you just stick the games in top, and they look ridiculous because the console's like that tall, and the games go out to here. But she had a ton of games for it, which were not for her. She played one game on her Nintendo. One. The only game she played, Tetris.
Tetris is
And
awesome.
she was a beast at Tetris.
Would you ever challenge her?
Yeah, and I never won. But we would sit in her bedroom, and she had a duffel bag full of games for us to play. And I got to experience a ton of different Nintendo games from that. And I had some real favorites and some real great memories playing Super Mario Bros. 3 or the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles games and just tons. And also playing a ton of games that turns out I really didn't like.
So is this why you became a Nintendo fanboy?
I don't know. Part of the fun of that experience, though, was getting them to work.
Because you had to blow on them and all
Yeah,
that
and
stuff?
NESs are quite finicky as it was, but she was also a heavy smoker.
That she
which
was, yes.
made it quite hard to get.
So you had to
a
clean the
connection.
context on,
Yep.
on the games?
Well, I wasn't smart enough to do that yet, so most of all was just keep trying it until it would work. And there were
Keep
some
pressing
games,
a button.
Some games we just never got to work.
That's funny.
But I played a surprisingly thorough amount of the NES's library through that. A bunch of Mega Man games, which I was terrible at. My favorite game for the NES, I played at her house, a game called Chrysalis, made by SNK. That's the end of the story.
That's the end of that story.
Yeah. I know. I
That's
kind of.
it?
Yeah.
That's just you just like hit a wall with your story?
I sure did. I got through speaking the sentence, and my brain goes, "You have literally nothing else to say in this."
Do you own an NES like that model yourself now?
No, because the two reasons. The top loader model is a lot more expensive because it's quite rare, and two, they cut out a very important feature. It doesn't have composite out. It only has RF.
Oh, interesting.
Now, what's really interesting is you could actually complain to Nintendo back when it was new,
Uh-huh.
and they'd say, "Send us your system, and we'll mod it for you
Really?
to do composite out." So there are some that have official composite out, but they're very rare.
I never played the NES. And my wife loved Nintendo. She, when she was a kid, she played Mario and Zelda and all that stuff. So I don't know if that's maybe where you get some of your love for Nintendo, but I was never into them. I played Atari and ColecoVision, which, by the way, that was on my list, but I forgot it. I had a ColecoVision. That probably I played more than any. And then I went into computers. And
Yep.
You know.
With the Atom.
hey, The Atom had Buck Rogers on tape. I played that once.
All right. Do you have another good story?
So I was thinking, and your experience with video games is very different than mine in the beginning, because I grew up in the 80s where you went to an arcade. And I was fortunate enough that I lived right upstairs from an arcade. So I got to play a lot of games, as they rotated them out, because, they would change them periodically from arcade to arcade. So I remember going downstairs and playing Pac-Man, Defender, Centipede, Dig Dug, Cubert, all that stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And then, like some weird ones that I couldn't even tell you the names of anymore. Plus, I grew up in Chicago, which happened to be where Bally, Midway, and Williams were all from. So a lot of people don't realize how much Chicago plays in the video game history and how many games originated. Most of them, were Japanese licenses, but they still were manufactured and built and tested and such in Chicago, which leads me to one of my stories. So I had gone to a party with my mother and aunt and their friends, and it was a big outdoor kind of event. And I met this guy who was a friend of my aunt's, and we were talking, and I found out he was a video game tester for Williams. I want to say Williams. It may have been Midway because they were really close in location, but I'm pretty sure it was Williams. And he was telling me, my day is spent testing the new consoles to make sure that, or, the new cabinets to make sure that they work. And I said, that is the coolest thing ever. I was so just amazed that this was what this guy got paid to do.
Yeah.
And he says to me, hey, I got to go into the office on Saturday, and it's kind of chill because, it's a weekend. Why don't you come with? And I'm thinking, oh, my God, I can go play video games.
Getting your golden ticket to go to the Willy Wonka factory.
That's unfortunately the good part of the story.
Uh-oh.
So Saturday comes around, I go to the dude's house. He's not there, and I never heard from him again. Never got to go.
Never?
Never. Guy just ghosted me. I mean, don't get a kid's hopes up like that.
Wow.
He spent a good hour telling me about the process and how they come together and how he gets to play them, and he decides if they're okay or not.
That's quite evil.
And then he ghosted me. It was awful.
Wow.
It hurt my feelings bad, and I still haven't recovered.
See, by the time I was old enough to play video games, the arcades were gone.
Which is such a shame because there was such a social element to it. One thing I thought was funny, in the arcades, you would decide, like someone's playing Pac-Man, right? And you want to play. Mm-hmm. You say, I got next. And you put your quarter up on the screen. And I always thought this was the dumbest thing because who knows whose quarter is whose?
Right.
There'd be like 10 quarters in there because we all claiming our spot in rotation. Mm-hmm. I always thought it was the dumbest thing. It was like, that quarter signifies that I am third in line.
See, it's so cool. I appreciate so much the recent revival of arcades thanks to the magical idea that you can drink alcohol and play video games. Yeah. It's so great.
And we have a few good ones in our area here.
Yeah.
So we're kind of spoiled with that. But what I really love about that experience is when I go with you and we walk through and you're like, did you ever play this one? Yeah. That one. Yeah. That one. Then we get into the more modern ones. Nope. You found my cutoff is what, 1992? And
yeah, just about.
Anything newer than that?
And no fighting games.
That's not true. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and the Simpsons game.
Those are beat 'em ups, not fighting games.
I played those. Street Fighter.
When we go to our regular place, I'm like, hey, you want to play some Street Fighter? You're like, nope.
But I've played it before.
My favorite arcade game ever is Bubble Bobble.
Which I find interesting.
Yeah.
Do you know which one I really enjoyed? Burger Time.
Yeah,
I used to love playing that. And remember I told you we lived right above the arcade? Mm-hmm. In the front room, you could hear a lot of the sounds from the arcade below. So like you could hear, like Pac-Man and such. It was just kind of a cool thing. I don't know if my mother appreciated it as much as I did, but the fact that we had an arcade that I could just go downstairs and go to
Yeah.
was a fun thing.
All right, what's next for stories? Is it my turn?
Yeah, why don't you tell us one?
Mine does have to do with arcade games.
This is going to be interesting.
I'm going to talk about your midlife crisis.
Which one? I've had a few.
When you said, man, I don't know what it is, but I need to hoard Apple II computers and stacks of software. And you got really, really into the Apple II for a while.
Yeah, well,
and
that was one of the most influential computers I've owned in my life.
I have very fond memories of sitting in the basement playing literally only 2 games out of your giant sack. They were Pac-Man and Galaga.
Interesting. I had a game that I used to play called Sneakers. Mm-hmm. And I had an Apple II version, which I showed to you and several of your siblings. And I remember them being blown away at how simple but how fun of a game it was. Mm-hmm. And the disc got destroyed, and I felt so bad, and I wanted another one. I went on eBay, and I bid on one. It was new and sealed in a box. Went for like $150. So I gave up the quest. I was just like, I'm never going to get this game again. And I ended up buying one sealed for the Atari 8-bit that we've never used yet. So
you're going to have to see if it's better than the Apple II version.
Right. Actually, it was just a fun game. Yeah. So sometime we got to set up and do that.
I've played tons more games on the Apple II now, and the Apple II wasn't really designed as a gaming platform.
I played a lot of games.
There are a lot of good games on it.
No, and we had the Atari Soft unboxing video that we did a while back, mm-hmm. which we unboxed tons of sealed Atari Soft games, and there was Donkey Kong, Centipede, Miss Pac-Man, a whole bunch of them. And most of them you have not played yet. And I know there's one that you really want to try, and that's that track and field one because it came with the special controller.
So it's questionable.
So since we're talking about Atari,
yeah,
I have to tell you my Atari story.
Okay.
Growing up in Chicago, this is earlier than when we lived on the arcade. We, were very poor family. So we did not have video games. We had a black and white TV. And the thought of ever getting a video game was very, very distant in our mind. And my mother had been dating a gentleman who had an ex-girlfriend who really wanted him back. So part of her plan to get him back was she would buy him things. Clothing, TVs, stereos.
Expensive gifts to try and win his heart.
Mm-hmm. And one day the box showed up. The Atari 2600 with every game. And he said, I don't play video games. I don't want this. Here, you can have it. So here I am, Atari 2600, every game, and a color TV that also she purchased. I was styling. I was so proud of myself. I got to tell all my friends, look what I got. And this lasted for about 2 weeks. Played every game as long as I could. My fingers hurt. And then a knock on the door. And it turned out it was the Chicago Police Department. The woman who had bought all these things was buying them with stolen credit cards. The police confiscated the TV, the Atari, and all the games. You want to talk about the most depressing thing a little kid can ever see is every bit of his entertainment walking out the door.
Yeah.
It was the worst.
How long was it from then until you got your first video games at home?
We finally got another Atari 2600 maybe a year or two later, or about a year later. Of course, we didn't have all the games because they were expensive and we only got a few. But, it took a good year before we got one to replace it. So that was my my first really
Lesson learned. Don't buy stuff with stolen credit cards or you'll make children from the 70s cry.
So that was my Atari experience, and that's one of. We actually have a 2600 here in our collection now, and we have a ton of games for it. And
Now you need a time machine to go back in time and give
it
yourself.
back to my young self. Yeah.
Hey, little dude, have this. So I gotta jump in time here, going from Atari stories to talking about money.
Money. Interesting.
You know the experience of getting your first paycheck. Feels great, right?
I vaguely remember.
Vaguely, yeah. I'm filling in that cliffhanger from earlier. My very first paycheck, my very first money I ever had of my own to spend on whatever I want, truly my money, I bought a Dreamcast.
It was a good purchase then.
It was. And this isn't like, when they were new. This was over a decade after the Dreamcast was dead. But, we...
You still have that one?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
We didn't have one for quite a long time. And I'm like, man, I love the Dreamcast.
So the worst thing about Dreamcast is at some point I gave mine away to a friend because I'm too nice. And I'm like, well... we got a PlayStation 2 now. I don't need this, I guess. And you don't have a game system, so I gave it to him. Instantaneously regretted that choice. I'm like, man, I just really I liked the Gamecast. Or
The Gamecast?
Dreamcast.
You're great at this.
Thanks. I had
Sonny, are you gonna go play games on your Gamecast?
I had what eventually became NBA 2K.
NBA Live, right?
No,
no.
That was EA's.
Ooh.
This was Visual Concepts back then, but it was actually
Sega.
Sega, NBA.
The Sega Sports titles.
And I had the NBA and the MLB one, and I remember showing someone who was not a gamer, look at how great these graphics are, and they're like, looks nothing like the real thing. And I was just so mad. I'm like, this is the closest we've come in ages to looking like, actual
things,
TV presentation. And and then I got my bubble deflated.
So I think the Dreamcast is an awesome system, and I got one for myself because I wanted to play all the classic Dreamcast games, and I wanted to go out and buy some. So I went to one of our local game stores, and they had no Dreamcast games.
So how long did it take from when you bought the Dreamcast to when you got a game?
Oh, no. They had Dreamcast games, but they didn't have a Dreamcast game section. See, I was disappointed. I was bummed out. And then I noticed, on the corner of their checkout area was a box just labeled CDs, $1. And it was all CDs in loose cases and whatnot. And I was picking through it because I was bored. I'm like, man, I'm here, right? And there were a ton of Dreamcast games in it.
So you got them for $1.
$1 each. And not only Dreamcast, they had a ton of video games in it. Particularly, good video games, not the filler. They had, your PlayStation RPGs that sell for quite a bit. You had, your Final Fantasy VII, you had to buy each.
So you said they were $1 a piece?
Yep.
How much you spend?
I spent, $20-$25. Right.
You got 25 games.
Yes. And I kept coming back. And they kept adding more.
So that box and you were friends.
Yes. And I cleared them out of all the good stuff. And I still have a ton of it. And then I also even would buy the stuff that was extra. Because they even had GameCube games in there that I already owned. But I'm like, this game, if it was in its case, it would be selling on the shelf there for $50.
So you buy the CD and then you eventually find a case that someone doesn't
Or
need.
I ended up giving tons of them away to friends.
Or you buy the CD because you don't care about the box, and then go back the next day and take your version in a box and sell it for 10 times what you.
I got so much use out of that, and they had this for quite a while. And I found out later that it was because they had bought out the another store that had gone out of business in the Chicago area.
That works.
And the store owner, instead of shipping all the games in their cases, said, "Screw it, I'm already out of this." Threw all the cases away and just shipped the guys the discs.
Oh,
And this company wasn't smart.
Right.
In fact, just 6 months or so after, they'd be out of business.
right.
Actually, I went that same year to their store on my birthday, and they had a bunch of Super Nintendo games there in their boxes, complete in box, beautiful, gorgeous copies, which Super Nintendo games in the box sell for quite a bit, and every one of them was marked at the cartridge-only price. So I bought all of them.
Wow.
And then the ones I didn't want, I literally took across the street to their competitor and sold for a profit.
So do you still buy physical media?
No.
I mean, think about this. Like, all my video game purchases now happen on Steam.
Yeah, I'd say it's Steam. Oh, I do tend to buy my games on Switch physically because
Well,
storage
I don't do
space is a luxury on that console.
Right.
So I buy a lot of those physically, but that's it. I'm mostly done with video game collecting because like all the stuff I wanted, I have now.
Right. Are there any consoles that you wanted that you didn't get?
I still don't own a Sega Genesis.
Interesting.
It's probably the most big one that I don't have, and I don't own any of the more recent consoles. I never bought an Xbox One or a PS4. I'm
Same here.
not gonna buy a PlayStation 5, or maybe I'll buy an Xbox Series X. Maybe, but once I got on PC, you know,
You never look back, right? And that's the thing with me. It's like I prefer gaming on a PC,
yeah,
hands down. So, but I do like the concept of physical media, you know, even though I can't justify spending the money on it. But I like, you know, there's something about being able to pull off a disc off a shelf and go, all right, I'm going to play this right now. And I know that, you know, like my Steam library is pretty big. And I know, like, you know, we have some friends who have ridiculously big Steam libraries, but it's so intangible. You miss that physical connection to your games, and I miss that. You know, when I used to buy computer games, they came in the big box, and they were $50 a piece. And I remember I would have that discussion, which game is this $50 going to go to? Because it was an investment at that point. And I remember I went to the store, Egghead Software in Chicago back then. And I was looking, I'm like, what am I going to buy? What am I going to buy? And I ended up buying this Japanese import called A-Train.
A-Train.
And that was my big purchase, you know, at that point in time. And I played that for a long time. And I know you can still get that on Steam, but, you know.
Yeah. A-Train's a huge, that's a, if you don't know, it's like a Japanese train simulator.
Right.
Think kind of in the vein of your Sims, like, you know, Sim City kind of stuff, but
Right.
more meticulous. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it was very detailed and very, you know, very difficult compared to like your casual Sims. But I remember buying that in a box, and you know, it was branded with Maxis, I believe.
Yeah, I think they did not create it, but they did license it
Japanese.
for the,
They did license it for here.
which makes perfect sense for them to be the ones to market it.
And all right, so we're getting close to the end here, but we're gonna do some rapid fire here.
Okay.
What Sim games have I owned?
You?
Yeah. You look through my old collection.
A lot.
See which
let's
ones you
see.
can remember.
Just in the Sim series, right?
In the
We're
Sim
not
ser-
talking
in the-
stuff like Roller Coaster Tycoon.
Correct.
Or,
Just in the
okay.
Sim series.
SimCity 2000. 3000. 4000.
Yep.
Or 4. Or, yeah, it's just 4.
It's 4.
Yep.
Yeah. I had the original SimCity.
Yep. Which you have again now.
Yep.
Simcopter.
Yep.
Streets of SimCity.
Yep.
Sim Island.
Yep.
Sim Health.
Yep.
Sim Earth.
There's another one, and I'm drawing a blank on the title.
Describe it.
Oh, it was a tower. thing?
Oh, Sim Tower.
Sim Tower, yeah.
Yeah, the
had
game
that too.
about towers, Sim Tower.
Yeah. And I saw there's a clone just like it on Steam.
Yeah.
But
And that's not counting the other, like Bullfrog did a ton. You had, like Theme Hospital and Theme Park and Theme.
I had Mall Tycoon 1, 2, and 3.
I have very strong memories of playing Roller Coaster Tycoon. Simulator
Airport
games
Tycoon.
were big.
I had that.
Never a one for the Sims though.
I can't stand the way they speak that Simlish.
Simlish,
It just annoys me. So, I'm curious.
Yeah.
What was the last game you bought?
Last game? The last game, actually, that's. It wasn't for me.
Okay.
It was a present for my girlfriend. I bought her a copy of Tatsunoko no, not Tatsune. The drum game, the Japanese. It's a rhythm game with
Yes, yeah. I have
Japanese
no
rhythm
idea.
game. Taiko drums.
Okay.
It's like an arcade rhythm game. Think Guitar Hero, but very Japanese. And I find it fascinating. I don't play rhythm games, but she's really, really into it.
You have no rhythm.
No, I don't. But it's just so weird because the songs they have in it are just seemingly anything from anywhere. You can go from playing along to the theme song to the hit anime Dragon Ball Z, then to Pac-Man music, then to the theme song to some sitcom, then to
Wow. That
then
sounds
to
crazy.
some Hatsune Miku music.
So you said Pac-Man, and it just made me think of one other story I wanted to share before we wrap up. Did you ever see Baby Pac-Man?
Not in person. But
I
we've talked about it quite a bit.
loved playing that thing. So Baby Pac-Man is a hybrid game. It was created by Midway, and it was actually one of the games that I think kind of ended their relationship with Namco because they did it kind of on their own without Namco's involvement, from what I
Yeah.
understand, and it didn't go well. And I'll explain what it is, and then I'll explain why that was actually a really bad thing. So the top part was the arcade game. The middle section was a pinball game. So if I remember correctly, as you went through the tunnels in Pac-Man, you went down and played the pinball part of it. So the reason this, it was a very innovative, crazy idea. But because they had to make the pinball part so small, it was prone to breaking. And they broke a lot.
Right. And then, both sections could theoretically break, and then you get pinball.
It's two games in one.
You're right.
And
So you got double the risk for.
And they were notorious for breaking down. So not only did they create a Pac-Man game without Namco's involvement, but it turned out to be one that was very prone to breakage. But I thought it was a unique concept, and it was fun. I enjoyed it.
Pac-Man is a series that gets to have a lot of experimentation. More modern, you have the I'm sure you've seen somewhere one of those world's biggest Pac-Man.
Yeah, those things are ridiculously big.
Yeah.
I saw them in Las Vegas when we were there last year. That's
crazy.
just crazy. Anything else you'd like to share before we wrap it up? Because
No, I think I'll save whatever stories I got left. For
All right.
a
Yeah, 'cause-
future episode.
And I'd encourage you guys to check out the video we did on the Atari 2600. I think it's actually a fascinating story, and I'd love to know your guys' feedback. We'd like to do more. I'm hoping that we can, get some more videos about consoles. We've got quite a few. We're actually working on acquiring more. If anyone has any they'd like to donate, hey, let us know. And I think with that, we can end this episode. So I'm going to hand it over to you to do the YouTube-y thing.
Okay, let's go.
'Cause
Speed run time.
You know how much you love doing
Ready?
that.
Make sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. Make sure to check out our Discord so you can talk to me about anything really at all. Make sure to support us on Patreon so we can keep the lights running on in the studio. Also, I think we have a Twitter, maybe.
I don't know. Maybe.
We got Facebook. And make sure to watch another video. That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
All right, so we will see you techies. Yes, I said techies next time. Bye.